So welcome back to the Color of Success, the Black Academic Experience podcast. My name is Brianna, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Malitsitso. Say hey. Hey. And our very special guest, Dr. Brandy Propst. Brandy is a Black feminist scholar practitioner with a passion for creating socially just spaces and disrupting and dismantling oppressive structures and practices within colleges and universities, specifically those that prohibit students, faculty, and staff from being authentic and successful in higher education. Dr. Propst, we're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk with you all today.
All right. And so just to start off, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, like who you are, what you do?
Sure. So, again, I am, I'm trying to get used to the doctor part, but I am Dr. Brandy Propst. I am, I think most importantly for me, I'm a country girl, but I'm also a first-year college student. And so I was the first in my family to go to college. My sister was the second, and we are the only two. And so, a very, very different experience there. I earned my bachelor's degree from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro in African American Studies and Sociology, as well as my master's as well. And I was in the Master's of Student Personnel Administration program at UNCG, and then, of course, just recently earned my doctorate, my PhD in Educational Studies with a concentration in higher education from UNCG as well. So I'm a Spartan through and through, 3-time alum. So UNCG has a special place in my heart with all of my degrees, but I also worked at UNCG at one point. My background is in first year experience and student success programs. And so I worked at UNCG for about 6 years in various roles, in orientation and first year seminar program and graduate admissions. Before coming to Elon, where I served as the director of Elon 1010, which is our first year seminar program. And I'm also adjunct faculty in the Masters of Higher Education program here at Elon as well. And so I've been at Elon for about 9 years. Outside of Elon, I also dabble in a little bit of consulting. I consult for a organization called Complete College America. So they do work with college completion from an equity perspective. And looking at student success programs. And so I consult for Complete College America on first year experience programs, student success programs, academic advising, and academic support. And so I enjoy doing that work as well. So that's a little bit about me. And like I said, I just recently graduated. And so I'm still trying to get used to the doctor. And all the things.
Congratulations, doctor.
Yes.
And so can you tell us why you decided to start your PhD program? So when you decided to start your PhD program and why?
Yeah, so, like I said, I worked at UNCG as well as earned my bachelor's and my master's from UNCG. But for me, while I was working at UNCG, throughout my career, I've always been in school. So I've never been in a graduate program where I wasn't also working full time. And so even after my master's program at UNCG, I started out full-time as a full-time employee, as well as and going to my master's program part-time. And then at some point I saw like 3 cohorts graduate. And so, because I also worked in graduate admissions at the same time. And I was like, I got to finish this thing. And so, I talked to my partner and I was like, I need to get this done, so that I can be available, because I also have a son. We also have a son. And so I was like, I need to get this done so I can, just focus on being a parent and being a family member as part of our family. And so I decided in my master's program, I actually quit my full-time job. I was working in graduate admissions at the time. And I went back to be a GA in the office of, what used to be called the Office of Orientation is now New Student Programs and First Year Experience. And so in undergrad, I did some orientation work and worked in that office. And then, I heard they still needed a GA. And so I just walked back in and I was like, hey, I need a GA position. I'm trying to finish this degree. And they happened to have a position that was available on the parent family side. And so that was a great opportunity to reconnect with that office and get a different kind of experience as a GA, to be the GA for the parent family program at that point. And so for me, once I finished my master's degree, because although I went back full time for my master's degree, in the midst of that, I ended up getting offered a job at UNCG, a full-time role. So then I went back to being a full-time professional while also finishing my degree, because me keeping that position was dependent upon me finishing my degree. And so, you know, just having different roles and being in school full-time versus part-time. Once I finished my master's, I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm tired of school. I want to just work, get some work experience. And I wanted to be an actual alum of the institution, because up until that point, I had been a student, because it took me a few years to get my bachelor's, and then it took me 3 years to get my master's. And so I was like, I just want to be a full-time employee. I want to enjoy being an alum. I'm not going to get any more degrees while I'm working here full-time. And so I purposely waited, which, you know, costs a little bit of money later. Because if you're a full-time employee at any school in the UNC system, you can get classes for free, right? But I chose not to do that for my doctorate. I wanted to be a professional, get some full-time experience in under my belt before I came back to get my doctorate degree. And I needed to convince myself that I actually wanted to get a doctorate. So, you know, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't over experienced, you know, and under experienced and over educated. That was really important to me. And so I worked at UNCG for about 6 years, and I did not apply to a doc program. And I did that on purpose. And then when I left UNCG in 2015, I came to Elon. And once I got to Elon and learned my job, learned the campus, learned the culture, then it really set in that, yes, I definitely want to get my doctorate. I had a coordinator role at UNCG, and then I came to Elon and took on a director role. And so for me, after learning my job and making sure I knew what I was doing, I was like, yes, definitely next steps. I need to get my PhD. And so that is when I then made the decision in 2017 to apply to the doc program at UNCG. And, you know, and for me, that was the only doc program that I applied to. I have a family geographically bound. And I'll be honest with you, I just don't want to uproot my Black son and live anywhere. So that's really important. My partner was also, you know, established in his field. And so, you know, UNCG had what I needed. It was also very flexible in terms of if you are a full-time employee, if you're a practitioner looking to get a PhD in higher ed, it has a great program, for my opinion. I will say I did not start out in the program that I graduated from, though. And I think that's the different experience that a lot of folks don't necessarily know can happen. But I started out in the ELC program. So still in the School of Ed. And it was an Educational Leadership and Cultural Foundations program. So I started out in that program because I got my master's in the higher ed program at UNCG, and I was like, let me do something different. Let's do a different department. And I really enjoyed the coursework in the program, but I miss my higher ed people. Like, I miss my higher ed conversations, because I'm a higher ed nerd. That's what my background is in. And so the ELC program definitely had a lot of K through 12 folks in the program. There were a small amount of higher ed folks. And so just the types of conversations we were having, the types of things, the content that we were learning about. Although I did use a good amount of content that I learned in those courses in my doc studies and my PhD, in my dissertation, I realized, like, yes, I need to move to a higher ed program. And so, you know, talked with my faculty about making that decision. And then I transferred over to the higher ed program. And so I started doc program in general, right, in 2017, but I moved over into the higher ed program at UNCG in 2018. And so I used the coursework from the ELC program as my electives, and as the courses to kind of support the other work that I was doing in programs. So really, for me, making the decision to go get my PhD was one, it had to be the right time. Had to be the right time because I needed to make sure that my son was going to be taken care of, like while I was in class and things of that nature. But it also had to be the right time because I knew I was going to take the full 7 years, because I wanted to be a present parent and partner. I didn't want to, you know, just check out for 3 years or 4 years and try to get it done in a short amount of time. But it also needs to be the right time for my job, because I think that's an important piece of the conversation here in terms of working as a full-time practitioner while also being a full-time doc student. So it needed to make sense for all the pieces of my life. and waiting a couple of years after I became a director, but also thinking about the time when how old my son was, the things he was involved in, and recognizing that by the time I finished, that he was also going to be in college. So I knew that I'm a planner. So so I planned all of those pieces out and really thought it through before I made the leap to actually apply to a doc program. But I will say, for folks that are always thinking about how do you know you want to get a PhD or EDD, whichever choice that you happen to go. I said at one point in time that I was not going to get a PhD. I was like, I'm not doing that. Why would I want to do that? And then I had I guess I refer to her as a mentor, a colleague, Dr. Nicole West. I met her at the African Americans Women's Summit at NASPA. I don't know how many years ago. But during that summit, they talk a lot about, if you want to get a doctorate, what does that look like? And I remember asking her, like, how did you know? And she talked about how it just hit her one day. She literally was walking down her steps and she said God spoke to her and was like, you need to go get that PhD. And I said, well, she said, so you will know when you will know. And she was right. I mean, it just felt right when I got here to Elon. It felt like that was the next step that I needed to take. And there was no question about it. And so, looking back over the years and thinking at one point I said I would never do it. And then to get to a point where I knew it was the right decision to make and what my next step should be. I always tell people, if it's the right thing for you to do, if it is for you, then it is for you and you will know. And it might not be in the most obvious way. Like you might be walking down your steps or you might just, get into a position and realize, yes, I'm ready for that next step. But just be open to whatever way it speaks to you. And don't always discount it because, we have different seasons of life. And at one season in my life, I said, I'm not doing it, but another season came and it made a lot of sense. So
I definitely remember saying, I do not want a PhD. Right. I remember crying when I was registering for my undergrad, just like, I do not want to be a college professor. No, and look at us now. So, but this is a perspective that we haven't got on this podcast until now. And so can you please share with us some of those successes and challenges of working full-time while getting a PhD?
Yeah, I think I'll start with challenges first. I think the challenge is, because I know for me, I was like, how am I going to fit this in? Like, where am I going to find the time work-wise? But even, and aside from work, we all have lives, right? We all have family in some way, shape, or form, whether you're a caregiver or you have a partner or you have even a caregiver of animals. Like, they need energy and time and space, right? And so I think, once you try to figure out what that looks like, in terms of life and those pieces, work is a whole other conversation because every single PhD student, right, or a doc student has life and family and people. But not every doc student has a full-time job where you have to be there. Luckily for my job, I'm more so 8 to 5. Although I know there are a lot of folks who work in higher ed and student affairs who are not 8 to 5. They're working 8 to 7. They're working late night events. They might have weekend events. And so really trying to think about where am I going to fit this in at is really important. I think that's a huge challenge for what I see a lot of folks in higher ed, particularly in student affairs. That is the challenge, is trying to figure out where am I going to fit this in. But I had a mentor that said to me prior to, because I asked a lot of questions. I was like, how did you do this? And like, what did you do? And so she said, she was like, think about the times or pay attention to the time or how you spend your time when you're not in the program. Like before you apply, pay attention to how you spend your time. And I'll be honest with you, once I did that, I realized I actually had the time. I'm thinking about, I'm natural. So I'm thinking about the amount of time that I spent to twist my hair while I'm binge watching TV, on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon, or the amount of time that I spent, watching Netflix. I'm like, this is a good 2 hours I just spent watching Netflix. Like I could turn that hour or two into reading an article or writing a paper. And so that was really helpful for me because when she said that, she was like, we have time for the things we want to make time for. And she was like, so if you start tracking your time and really thinking about, okay, what could I be doing differently here? And not to say that those things are important, right? Like we got to wash our hair, we got to twist our hair, we got to, it's good to have leisure time and Netflix and all that, right? But I was spending a lot of time chilling, hanging with my son, going to his sporting events. But when he didn't have sporting events, and once I was off work, if we weren't at sporting events or at my partner's sporting events because he's a coach, then we were at home hanging out. And so I realized I have time. I just have to, it's how I use my time that's really important. And I think that becomes a challenge for folks if they're not thinking about it in that way. But I also think for a lot of folks, they're trying to figure out, how am I going to survive? Like I got to sleep. I need to be able to do my job well and be in school and do that well. How do I have those conversations, right? So being upfront with your supervisor is really important. That's a challenge, right? But it's also something that you need to be successful. So my supervisor at the time when I started my doc program had done the same thing that I did. She took, I think, a full 7 years to get her PhD. She worked full time prior. She worked full time while she was getting her PhD at UNCG as well. And so she understood. So I was very upfront about what my goals were when I took the position. But also once I got to that point, I was like, I'm ready to do this. So I need to have a conversation with you about what that might look like and how that might change for me. And I think recognizing that it can be a challenge if you don't have those upfront conversations because then your supervisor doesn't know what to expect. You might need to take a couple of days so you can write a paper, or, when you're taking coursework, things look very different than when you're actually writing your dissertation. So I think sometimes the challenges, if we do them, if we address them and try to resolve them well, then they turn into successes, right? And I think for me, being able to look at it from that standpoint of, okay, what am I doing with my time? How can I repurpose that? But who do I need to have conversations with about how I'm spending my time, right? And so, if I'm at work and I have, talking to your supervisor about, is it okay for me to work on things while I'm at work? What does that look like? It really, those are the difficult conversations that people need to have so they can figure out, how can you make this happen, right? But also setting boundaries. So again, my job is pretty much 8 to 5. If I need to stay late, I can, for my own purposes, not because I have to, but recognizing that sometimes I stay late just so I can stay in the office and work on something, right? And sometimes that something was, I need to do a paper and I don't want to stop what I'm doing. I don't want to move and go home and drive and all that. So I'm just going to stay here for the next 2 hours and work this out. But I'm not working on work stuff. Don't assume that I'm working on work stuff, right? Or, especially once I got to writing my dissertation, having those conversations about, I will be taking off a week here, a week there, or, I know folks who have taken off 3, 4, 5 weeks at a time to finish their dissertation, right? But you have to be upfront about those conversations, make good plans, and make sure you have your work done so that you can actually do that and not be interrupted and things of that nature. So I think communication, planning, having difficult conversations with your supervisor and your support system, in addition to the people that you may supervise. So I'm at director level, so I have folks who report to me, and just being upfront about, this is when I'm on, this is when I'm not on. And so I would text and be like, I'm writing, don't text me today. Whatever you need, just put it in the email. When I get to email that day, I will tackle it, but I'm writing. And so I was very open about, this is what I'm doing. I don't need any interruptions. Don't contact me unless it's an emergency, those type things. And so, having those boundaries, having clear communication, but you got to be very upfront about it, so that your successes, so that you can be successful. And because if not, then those things can be huge challenges and can be barriers, right? I think the last thing I'll talk about is also being very upfront with your chair, right? That's a whole other person that you have to be mindful of. And I think sometimes, depending on the program and kind of what your goals are, there's expectations of you as a doc student, right? Mm-hmm. And being very clear to your chair about, this deadline doesn't work for me. Or here's a deadline that I can do, right? Because I work in first year experience, I work in advising. So certain times of the year, advising and registration, I'm in appointments all day, every day. So, that's not going to work. And so I'll give you a great example. My chair, he wanted me to defend a little bit earlier than what I defended. And I said, I can't do that. We're in the middle of registration for those 2 weeks. I can either defend before or I can defend after. And I was like, the likelihood of me doing the before is very, very small. I was like, so we can do the after, but throughout, I don't want to do that to myself. I'm not going to be 100%. So recognizing the ebb and flow of your job, your full-time job, and being very clear about this is not a good time versus that's a good time, and what that looks like. So conversation, communication with all people who are involved is really, really important, I think.
Mm-hmm. And so I just want to ask a question around, so taking the full 7 years, what did that look like before you got to the dissertation phase? Was that like 2 classes a semester or?
Yeah. So my first year, I purposely did 1 class a semester because I was like, let me ease in. I was like, I don't know, not really sure what it's going to look like. So let me ease in. So my first year in the ELC program, I did 1 class a semester. And then my second year, by the time I got to the higher ed program, I was like, okay, I can kind of plan this well. And I did 2 classes per semester. So it was enough for me to be full-time, right? As a doc student, you could take 2 classes and be full-time. It was very much that. And then some of it was, I will say what was helpful for me in working full-time was looking at so the doc programs at UNCG, at least for the higher ed program and ELC program, most of the courses, if not all, are offered from 4 to 7, right, in the evenings. So that was a plus. So I would say anybody that's looking to be a full-time staff member or a full-time employee while they're also getting their doc, you definitely have to find a program that caters to that population or that has flexibility with coursework, right? I mean, I know there are some doc programs where they're teaching courses throughout the day, and that wouldn't have worked for me. And so, recognizing that, okay, this is what my day looks like. And so on those days when I had class started at 4, I would leave work at 3 o'clock. So Elon's about 30 minutes away from UNCG, but I had colleagues that were working at other institutions in Durham and Chapel Hill, Raleigh, and they would leave work around 2 o'clock to get to class by 4 because of traffic, right? And so it just, my calendar was blocked at work for those days. I tried to make sure that what I had going on those days work-wise were not as heavy because I knew I was gonna have to leave at least, an hour or 2 beforehand. And so managing my calendar was really important, and managing expectations was really important. But calendar was blocked from 3 until 5 on all of those days, and I would head out at 3. If there were days where I had to get to class late, I would always notify my faculty. Luckily, like I said, for our program, majority of, just about everybody, probably except for one person I can think of, we were all full-time practitioners. So, the flexibility was there, the understanding was there. The program, although we have folks who have gone on to be faculty, most of us are still full-time practitioners. And so I think, again, having that understanding and that communication as to I may be late and those types of things. So that was pretty much the plan, the routine until COVID hit. So COVID was a real interesting.
It was a doozy.
Don't we know it?
Right. It was a doozy. I remember being in class, and we were kind of sitting in class in March, early, first week of March, and we were like, so are we here next week or are we not? Because we knew other places were shutting down, and it was kind of like, well, we'll just see, but let's just plan to be on, I can't even remember. I don't think it was Zoom.
It was Zoom. Oh, was it Zoom?
I don't know if it was Zoom or if it was
wasn't Zoom.
What was that other thing?
Yeah, so I just remember we were all very unsure, and our professor was like, I don't know. So it was just kind of like, we'll figure it out. And so, I had 2 years of classes in terms of coursework that were all Zoom, all online. And so that was really interesting too, because that wasn't something that we all had planned for. But in all honesty, for some folks, I think it was helpful because they didn't have to hop in their car and drive 2 hours. I think for me, I would still leave work. So I left work, I would go home, log on, just so I can be in my space, get in my academic space, and not be in a work environment. So, and then after that, I was working from home anyway. Although we were open, Elon was wide open during COVID. So that's a whole other conversation. But fall 2020, we were open. We were in person, unlike many other institutions in the area and across the country. We were one of the few institutions that were open in fall 2020. but I worked from home. So, and when I worked from home, I would log off from work and then log on to my classes. And so, I think for the time that it took, it was very different, but it was intentional. So I still did 2 classes per semester. There was only one summer where I took a class over the summer, and that class was going to be online regardless. And so just being intentional, recognizing like what was a good fit. I never did 3 classes per semester. It was, to me, I was like, that's too much if I'm working full time. And then I tried to be strategic about the courses that I took in the fall versus the spring, because fall tends to be a little bit busier. Because I also teach undergrads. I teach first years because I run a first year seminar program. So in the fall, I try to schedule, courses that were a little less heavy versus in the spring, I could do a little bit more. I'll tell you, I had a pretty good experience in my doc program up until stats. Stats about took me out. So.
Oh no.
Yeah, it did. And we took stats online because it was in the middle of COVID. So we were struggling.
I think you and Brianna were in the same class.
Listen, gosh. When I tell you stats made me rethink all of life. I was like, this is ridiculous. I was like, I don't even know like why we are here. Like it was wild. And it was online. I had stats. I had part 1 and part 2, both online. And I was like, whew, we were
You all were definitely in the same stats class.
Yes. What was his name?
Don't tell us. We know who it is. Don't tell us.
Oh, God. But listen, though, but he was trying, though. Like, he really was trying. It was just, it's stats. And we were online. I mean, like, what could you do? What could you do? But I tell you, I hired a tutor real quick. After that midterm, I was like, no, ma'am. I will not. No, sir. Hired a tutor real quick. I was like, I will put some money into this. And that was rough. I don't know if stats would have been that rough if it wasn't online. I'm not really sure. I think that threw a wrench into kind of the plan, but I was still going to do the 7 years regardless. And then I defended my proposal, I think it was January 2022. Yeah, January 2022. So I did, 5 years of coursework, and then I took a little bit of time to write my dissertation. I needed a break because COVID took a lot out of us. And I actually had COVID while I was finishing up my proposal, right before I defended my proposal. So I took a break. I took a much needed break after that while I was doing IRB and all that kind of stuff. And so although I didn't need the full 2 years, I took it because I was like, I think COVID added an extra layer of just burnout to everybody, regardless of what you were doing. And so I could have finished in 6 years, but I chose not to. So.
And I know we're going to talk about your dissertation because that's also, we're really excited in your topic, but also, your content was close to home. And I know I experienced sort of a lot of fatigue around theorizing about these issues that are lived experiences. But before we go there, I just wanted to ask, because, we all have this fantasy that if you're working, you're closer to the data, it makes class assignments so much more meaningful. Did you experience any of that at all?
I think yes and no. So my topic is very personal to me, right? And the methodology that I utilized allowed me to be a part of the study. So it was a very different experience than I think most doc students probably have, where they're somewhat removed from the study itself other than being the researcher. For me, I was close to the data because it was part of my lived experience. That was kind of my positionality in terms of why I chose the topic that I chose. But I also think, I do think that working full time was, I think for my brain, it was like, what are we doing? Like my brain was constantly being pulled in 2 different directions. So I literally would be at work and, just it's on your mind. Like it doesn't go away, right? Like I was dreaming about my dissertation. I was dreaming about my data. And then when I'm at work, I'm telling my brain, no, we have to do these things. And my brain is like, no, this is where we are. And so it was a struggle in that sense to have to figure out how to compartmentalize. And I know, once I got to proposal phase, while I was doing coursework, it didn't really bother me as much. Like, it was very easy for me to compartmentalize. Okay, I'm at work and then I go to class and we talk about these things and I read. I had a schedule on how I read for stuff, how I prepped for class, while, when I was at home or, during lunchtime, whatever it was, I had a system as to how I did that. So that it was easy to compartmentalize like coursework. But once I got to proposal and was writing proposal, now that was difficult because for my proposal, well, not even proposal, I'll even say for our comps. I mean, for comps, we had our comps, we had 2 weeks to do comps. And so I remember I was at work and I was like, I got to take off. Like, I can't do this. And we also did comps in the midst of COVID while we were taking stats online. So it was crazy because I had a colleague who worked full time and she forgot to schedule her comps after our stats midterm. So she had midterm and comps in the same week. And I was like, girl, she was like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. I was like, there's no way. I said, nope, I purposely planned to do comps after the midterm was due so that I could get through midterm and just focus on comps. And so, and we were working full time. So we had to take off days, block out days of the calendar. And so I do think like when your brain is in the data and you're constantly in it, but when you have to work full time, it is a struggle to compartmentalize and tell your brain, no, I got to shut that off right now. Like, I can't be in that, to sit in meetings or to be in student appointments. And this is what's going on in your brain. And you're like, no, I got to focus. And so, at some point after proposal, I got really good at being able to say, these days I'm working on my dissertation, I'm working on proposal, I'm working on these things. And then if it's not these days, it's not planned out, then I'm not working on it those days. So, I might have worked on it for 3-4 days at a time. And then because this was my busy part of the week, I had to check out, So it was like checking out and checking in, which can be difficult, right? Because then I did realize I had to reorient myself with what was I just working on? Where did I stop at? And so that is a bit of a challenge in terms of turning your brain off and turning it on. When I know I said a couple of times, gosh, if I was a full-time doctor and didn't have a full-time job, I'd be in this all day, every day. Like, I would have been in it all day, every day. Just because, one, my topic, I was really interested in it, but two, once you get started, I know for me, once I get started, I'm on a roll. So, that was difficult. It was difficult.
It can be a dark space to be in all the time, though.
I hear that too.
I was looking at Brianna's face. I'm like, the grass is always greener on the other side.
I can imagine.
And so was there any overlap between like your professional experience and your dissertation topic?
Oh, 100%. Yes. Yes. So my topic, so I looked at, I explored the experiences of Black women student affairs professionals and the critical incidents that occur within our workplace relationships with white women higher education professionals at historically white institutions. I came up with that topic because I needed to know if everybody else was experiencing what I was experiencing. And that's just the real of it. I mean, that's really where the topic came from. The topic also came from working at a prior institution. There was a group of Black women in my division. We were very lucky to have that many Black women in the division. It's probably like 6 or 7 of us. We would get together for lunch a couple of times a week. And I kid you not, we call it the caucus because we would just get together and talk and chit chat and, but I kid you not, every conversation did not matter. By the time lunch was up, something had occurred or happened in relation to working with a white woman or white women in the division that we would end up talking about. And it was a good space to vent and to, support one another. But it was just something that kind of resonated with me. And I knew before I entered my doc program that my topic was going to be about Black women. I knew that. I knew if I got a PhD, my topic was going to be about Black women, but I didn't know what I was going to narrow it down to. For the doc program in higher ed, we have a pro seminar class that helps you really think about how to narrow your topic down, how to write a lit review, how to really think about what do you want to write about. And so in that class is what kind of gave me the idea about what if I, this is something I've always been interested in. I want to know if anybody has had my experience. And so that's where kind of my topic came to birth in 2018 in terms of working with white women. I also recognized at that point that a lot of we talk about this as Black women within our own circles, but when you look in the research, it's just not there. Like, we're not talking about it in the research. Like, it's a thing that occurs, it's a thing that's like touched on, but nobody really had done a study on it to really talk about what it looks like and how it's actually happening, and what critical incidents look like and how it impacts our careers. And so that's kind of the angle that I took in terms of, we know this occurs, right? Like, but what's occurring, and is it positive or negative in terms of the critical incidents? And then, like, how does it impact our careers? And then how are we, like, what are the tools, the strategies, and support systems that we are utilizing to navigate these spaces and these critical incidents that we are experiencing? And so, yes, my topic was very much overlapped with my day-to-day. And for me, it was very, very, very much overlapped because probably out of my 11 supervisors that I've had throughout my career, so I've been in higher ed for about 17 years, I've had 11 supervisors. Out of the 11 supervisors, 9 of them have been white women. The other 2 have been white men. I've never had a supervisor of color, ever. And so that was really, really, really evident for me that, is this a thing that's a part of it? And so some of the questions that I asked in terms of the demographics, I asked all my participants, who are your supervisors? Are they white women? Is your supervisor white women? And it was really interesting to see that the critical incidents with supervisors was very important in the things that they were experiencing. So that was one of my findings as well, is that most of these critical incidents are occurring with white women who are supervisors or Black women. And so what does that look like? The power dynamics that's a part of it, all the things. And then how that plays into white supremacist culture, right, within higher ed, and the systems that we have built here. So, very much everyday life for me.
That is so fascinating. So fascinating. I mean, we could spend a whole other podcast interview talking about your dissertation, but I'm curious about, what was your most interesting finding?
Oh, my most interesting finding. I would say my most interesting finding. So I used, I think something to touch on here. I use sister circle methodology. So I didn't use a traditional methodology. So the sister circle methodology was created by Dr. LaToya Johnson from the University of Georgia in 2015. And so she saw, sister circles and how we communicate as Black women, how we get together, how we empower each other. And she made that into a methodology. So a lot of people think, oh, you're just doing a focus group. And it's like, no, a little more than a focus group, because with sister circle methodology, the researcher is also a part of the sister circle, right? So you're a researcher as participant. And so, which takes away some power dynamics. So you're not just sitting here gathering all this information from a group of women and then doing something with it. Like, you're actually contributing. You're talking about your experiences. You're learning from them. They're learning from you. So you're sharing. So that removes some of those power dynamics. But I think the most interesting part, which is something that I saw in other studies that people touched on, but they didn't really talk about it a lot. But a large number of my participants talked about this idea of, so we talked about surveillance, because I use Black feminist theory as well. We talked about this notion of surveillance and how Black women are watched and surveilled in academic spaces. And one of the things that my participants brought up was this idea of the plantation and the overseer. The historically white institutions being the plantation, but the overseer being other Black women. So they were talking about how Black women were being utilized as to surveil other Black women. And when you look at other studies about Black women experiences, you do see this come up a little bit in terms of relationships with other Black women, but not in the way that it came up in my study. And so what they talked about in participants, they were talking about how relationships with other Black women, but what came out of the conversation was they started to realize, because I was like, well, why is this happening? And we all had an experience of a contentious relationship with another Black woman, either in our office or a Black woman across campus. And in talking about the critical incidents that occurred, because again, it was all centered around critical incidents, it was very noticeable that every single critical incident with the other Black woman, the root of it was a white woman on that campus. So a white woman supervisor, white woman colleague had pitted two Black women against each other. And because of this, these Black women were not talking. They were no longer, friends. Mm-hmm. Some of us in the sister circle, those Black women were also sorority sisters. So we had a different relationship with that Black woman, and we no longer had a relationship at all. And so realizing that, wait a minute, this is kind of rooted in white supremacist culture as well, in terms of pitting Black people against each other, right? And kind of that notion of plantation and the overseer. And then a really important piece that came out of it was, how do we make sure that doesn't happen? How do we make sure that doesn't occur? And it really came down to having conversations, talking about it. Because I think what a lot of participants were talking about is typically when those things happen, we would just dismiss one another and say, I'm not fooling with her. She can't be trusted. Mm-hmm. Kind of that crabs in the barrel mentality. There can only be one. So instead of approaching it that way, thinking about sit down, have a conversation with your sister and and what's happening, right? Like what's going on. So that we can get through all of that. And a couple of the participants talked about when they did that, that's when they realized what was happening wasn't even real. Like it was something that was being created. It was an issue that was being created by a white woman at the institution, which is what helped them kind of overcome it. And so I think that was the most interesting, because I don't think other studies had taken it that far. It was always, it's always the worst when it's your own people, but there was never any resolution to it. And so I'm hoping that at least in my study, that gives people a little bit of resolution to think about what's really happening here. How can we try not to have that happen? And what can we do? How can we communicate with one another in a better way to really get to the root of the issue, and call out what's really going on. I just think it was interesting that every single participant had a similar experience. And for most of us, there was a white woman at the root of it. Things you just don't think about. Yeah.
But also, this whole issue of white women is, I think when you're socialized in a different part of the world, it's something that I had to learn or become aware of. Like it's not inherent in every part of the world. But what you said right there is just so eye-opening to think about, like, who's the white person at the center of this conflict that I find myself in. But I know that you also advise students and you also advise graduate students. And so did the findings of your dissertation, did they feed into your work?
Yeah, definitely. And so I think one of the things that really came out that I hadn't made too many connections to in the midst of me doing my topic was because I was really focused on the practitioner experience. A couple of my participants really pointed out, in terms of in their experiences, what they thought about is if this is happening to me, if this is how you treat me as a practitioner, as someone that has credentials, as someone that is your colleague, then how are you treating students? How are you interacting with students who look like me? And so for me, I hadn't made those connections prior to me collecting my data, because I was very focused on the practitioner experience, the experiences of Black women. And I think for me, thinking about the implications of my research, that was one of the things I pointed out, especially in terms of the implications that I had for historically white institutions, and thinking about because what we saw and what we're seeing is that Black women are leaving higher ed. Black women student affairs professionals. I mean, yes, there's a mass exodus of a lot of people leaving higher ed, but there's a mass exodus of Black women leaving higher ed. And so when we're talking about how Black women are being treated on our campuses, especially historically white institutions, that trickles down to students as well, to Black students, students of color. And when they're being treated in that way, but then in addition to that, we have lower numbers or smaller numbers of Black faculty or faculty of color or Black women on campuses, then that also impacts the student experience. So we're leaving because we're not being treated well. So now the numbers are smaller, so students don't see people that look like them. So then it's impacting students that way, but then it's also impacting students because, if this is how you treat me, then I can't imagine how you treat a student, right? And so it did very much so in terms of how does that impact the student experience if Black women are experiencing these critical incidents, and then they choose to leave the field. So not only are they leaving historically white institutions, they are leaving the field of higher ed in general in terms of student affairs. And so how does that then impact the students of color on college campuses at historically white institutions, and their experience? So it definitely trickles down. But I also think just being able to do our jobs in the way that we do. And so, one of my participants talked about how, there was a critical incident with her supervisor because she tried to say that she saw less advisees than what other staff members did. And she said, no, it's not that I'm seeing less. She said that I'm seeing mostly students of color, and I spend a lot of time with them. So my numbers are just as important and just as critical. It's just that I'm spending a lot of time with the same student. You know what I'm saying? Because we're having some intense conversations. I'm really advising them. I'm helping them. And we don't have that many students of color, but I end up being the student of color person. I end up being that person because I'm also a Black woman. And so that how that was turned on her in terms of saying she wasn't doing her job, when really she was taking on a lot of emotional labor, right? That we sometimes don't want to see whenever you have students of color and Black faculty or practitioners of color, and they are constantly being sent to those people, right? So it was just interesting how that impacted her experience as well. But that was a critical incident for her. So where she needed to kind of prove that what she was doing was just as important or valuable as what the other white staff members in the office were doing.
That is something that we've heard. The concept of this Black tax and not getting credit for doing that work compared to the work of other peers, But as our time concludes, what advice would you give people thinking of going into grad school now that you've completed? I'm not sure if you're ever going back to school.
Yeah.
The first time.
Whatsoever. I think the advice that I would give, again, communication is key. Communicate. Not only to other people, but to yourself. Why are you doing this? The why is important. If you're just trying to get a PhD or EDD or a doc, if you're trying to get a doctorate just so you can say you have it, that is not going to get you through this. It is not. It's just so you got to be invested. You gotta want to do it. But you also you got to have something that's keeping you there. And I just don't think that saying, just so I can say I have a PhD is going to keep you there. Right. Because it's times where you be like, why? Why am I
here? Exactly.
Right. I got a job. I got a check. I'm good. I don't need to do this. I'm fine. You will talk yourself completely out of it. So if that's why you're here, I'll just tell you to go and rethink it. So I think it's also important to have a topic that really speaks to you. There wasn't a time where I was like, I hate my topic and I wish I would have done something different, or I think picking a topic that really speaks to you, that you're really invested in, but that keeps you motivated is really important. Because when you start having to read all these books and all these articles and do these lit reviews and all the things, and go into all this data, you really need to love it. Because you really need to love it. So if you don't love your topic, and I know that's a difficult thing to think about, you want to make sure you're doing the right thing. I was very purposeful in that. So I made a point to, while I was doing my coursework, I would make sure that my assignments were always centered around something dealing with Black women. And I would tell my professors, I get that this assignment, you structured it to be about students, but that is not the population that I am studying. So I am requesting to write this paper on Black women. And that was just what it was. I was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm studying. As a full-time practitioner, I don't have the time to just be exploring stuff, right? I don't have the time to just be exploring topics, just hoping. It didn't make sense for me to write a paper about a student population when my population that I'm studying is Black women. I needed to do all the things to gather all the information and be strategic about it. So that's something that I would even offer. Make sure you're asking those questions so that you can gather the information that you need about the population that you're studying. I'd also say, take care of yourself. You have a self-care plan. So I would write out like what my writing plan was, and then in the writing plan, I would build in time to where I'm watching a show, I'm taking a nap, like, and that is what kept me motivated to get this written. I know if I write these 3 pages, I get to watch Grey's Anatomy. Like that was my that was my reward. Or, you know, I'm gonna set up a massage on this day, and I'm like, if I don't have this done, I got to cancel the massage. So I really want the massage. So when people think writing plan, they think just put plan in writing. I planned everything. I planned when I was gonna sleep, when I was gonna nap. I'm gonna eat. So, you know, when I was writing my dissertation, I was off from work for a week, and I had a schedule. I treated it like work. Get up, check a couple of emails, write from this time to this time, eat lunch, write from this time to this time, eat dinner. I planned it all. And so I think planning in not only the writing, but the self-care is really important, because you'll need the self-care to get through it, and to make it worthwhile. But have a support system. The support system is really, really important. Not only your family, but other doc students. Identify that support system. I have a special place in my heart for the folks in my program. We, all of us have been graduating at different times, but we have a group chat. I will also say, I don't think I've mentioned this, most of my program were Black folks, mostly Black women. And that is unseen, right? So I will say that we probably had a very different experience than other folks in PhD programs, because there's power in numbers. And so we supported one another, even for the folks that are like, we're all in different places. Some of us graduated a year ago, 2 years ago, but we are still supporting each other in the group chat. So when one of us gets to a place, the other one gets there. We're still pushing along. There's still some of us that are collecting data. Some are writing proposal right now. And, you know, even for the folks who are finished, we're still in the group chat. What do y'all need? Where are you at? What's the writing plan? You know, you need accountability partners, those types of things. So I think having support, not only from family members and friends, but people who actually understand what you're going through every day is really, really important. You know, and if that's folks that are in your program, or whether they're not in your program, find those people. There's plenty of writing groups, really good organizations out there that can provide support, that you definitely should tap into.
Thank you so much, Dr. Propst, for your advice. I mean, your perspective is definitely not one that we've had on the podcast, so we really appreciate you. But we won't let you go before we ask our fun little question. So if your PhD experience was a song or a book, what would the title be?
Ooh, a song or a book?
Or a poem.
Gotcha. Well, I'll tell you the song that, you know, when I was starting my proposal, and really, that really kept me going, was Keep On Moving, Don't Stop. Old 90s song. But yeah, it's just, you know, that keep on moving, don't stop. Like what I think my PhD experience, that was definitely it for me. Keep on moving, don't stop. I mean, I would tell myself, okay, I got this. Keep on moving, don't stop. You know, it's just, you got to have something that's going to motivate yourself. And I think that song was really the one that, you know, I'm an 80s baby, but I grew up in the 90s. So, that resonated with me. So I definitely would say that would be my experience.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Propst, for being a guest on our podcast.
Thank you for coming. We really appreciate it.
Yes, definitely. Thank y'all for having me. Y'all doing great work. Y'all doing good work. All the things, I think, you know, talking about it from that perspective of doc students of color is really, really important. And what that looks like for us, what success looks like for us, and how we get there is really, really important. And so I appreciate the work that y'all are doing, and the time and the energy that y'all are putting into it to make sure our voices are being heard. So thank you.
All right.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button and bell button.
Thank you for listening to The Color of Success.
Have a good one.